Given that the overwhelming majority of children suffering the immeasurable loss of a parent due to COVID are in the community, we have been continuously working to ensure that families and communities have the resources and supports they need to thrive. Through a partnership with New York Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children, ACS and our providers refer children to their trauma recovery program and parents to their crisis grief counseling program. In addition, at the start of the pandemic, we created new website pages that we continue to update, one for families and one for youth, to provide information about how to access resources and supports needed. Our child protection staff, the community partnership programs, the family enrichment centers, and the prevention service agencies have spent the last 2 years providing families with diapers, cribs, hand sanitizer, face masks, food, formula, laundry cards, and transportation. I want to take this moment to thank them all for their incredible work and for their commitment to making sure that families have the supports they needed during this challenging time. In addition, as you know, ACS is in the process of expanding our family enrichment centers from 3 to 30 over the next 3 years in the communities that were hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. These new community resources will be available for years to come as communities and families navigate with the lasting impacts of the pandemic. While ACS appreciates the Council's interest in ensuring the children who have lost a parent or caregiver to COVID-19 receive the services and support that they need, we do have some concerns with the proposed data reporting required. Given the thankfully small number of children who lost a parent to COVID who are placed with ACS, we are concerned that the reporting could violate confidentiality laws. In addition, ACS does not have a data system that records the information required, and as such, we would need to manually track this information for the next 10 years. ACS looks forward to negotiating this bill with the Council. Intro 294-2022 would require ACS to provide parents or guardians with a multilingual disclosure form during a child protective investigation, with information about rights, investigation, contact information for legal organizations, and contact information for the ACS Office of Advocacy. ACS agrees that the parents and guardians should receive written information regarding the child protective investigation and resources that can help them and their family. We look forward to negotiating this bill with the Council. In conclusion, I would like to thank all of the staff across the juvenile justice continuum for all of their efforts to provide a safe, supportive, caring, and programmatically engaging environment for youth. I know that this has been even more challenging throughout the pandemic, and this work has not gone unnoticed. I've been visiting these sites and facilities regularly and so impressed by the dedication, commitment, thoughtfulness, and creativity of our teams. Thank you, Chair Ayala. Thank you, members of the General Welfare Committee. We look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that we've also been joined by Councilmember Lee. Thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony today. I want to start by acknowledging the great work that your team has been doing. I was very fortunate to visit the Horizon Juvenile Detention Facility in the South Bronx and was very impressed with the dedication that the staff show to the young people detained there. I guess that the first question would be, how are we doing in terms of numbers? I don't know if I captured that, if I caught that in your testimony. I know that during the time of our visit, we were seeing some of the highest numbers of detainees, primarily due to the fact that the court system was so slow. Where are we in terms of numbers today?
So as of this morning, in secure detention, we have about 150 young people in secure detention, and an additional 30 in non-secure detention. That is about the same place where we were when you visited us. We are seeing an increase in young people coming to secure detention, but we are also starting to see the courts move more quickly. So we're really pleased to see that. So we're at about the same census, but we have seen both an increase in admissions and in exits.
Okay. Do you know what the average age of those detained is?
I'd have to get you those exact numbers, but about 108 are adolescent offenders, 31 are juvenile offenders, so they'd be the younger ages. We have 8 children who are classified as juvenile delinquents in secure detention and 31 in non-secure detention. So that should give you a little bit of a range of the ages. Okay. The kids who are classified as juvenile delinquents in secure detention tend to move much quicker through the system. So we have 8 there this morning.
Okay, so when you get the age ranges, so maybe I think this pretty much clarifies that for me, but I would also love to know what the youngest age of of the detainee is. Can you also share what the current length of time is
Sure.
as a result of the slowdown?
Sure, I'm going to let Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg give you because we do have the exact ages.
Okay.
So we'll give that, and then we can talk
Okay.
about length of time.
Did we swear Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg in? Yes. Okay, all right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The vast majority of young people in secure detention are between the ages of 15 and 17. Approximately 60% fall within that range. We had in 2021, in the calendar year, we had 10 who are 19 years old, 45 who are 18 years old, 85 who are 14, 28 who were 13, and there were 10 under the age of 13. Now, just so you're aware, most of the children who come through as juvenile delinquents leave secure detention very quickly. So most of them are out of the building within a week, and many of them are released within a day or two of their entry.
That makes me feel better because I think my heart just like sunk to think that we have that many young, children in the system. It's heartbreaking. Oh, I had to catch my breath there for a minute. Can you share a little bit regarding, so I've been there, I've seen, what it looks like. What does so the court cases have started to ramp up a little bit. So why are the numbers still so high? Is it because we're incarcerating at a more rapid rate, or is this, I'm assuming a lot of this is tied to the gun violence work that the NYPD has been doing?
So as you know, secure detention is pre-disposition, right, pre-trial. So the young people who come to us there have not been convicted, and so we are working with them. We are seeing an increase in the number of young people coming into care. It's sort of evened out by the increase of exits of children through the family court, and exit to other parts of our continuum, right? So a young person, as Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg was sharing, a young person can be with us for a very short time, even less than 24 hours, and go to either another part of our continuum, community-based alternatives, close to home, if they're JD. And so the census has been sort of at an equilibrium since I've been here. It's been somewhere between 140 and 152. But over the past few months, we have seen an increase of young people coming to us and an increase of young people exiting.
I'm looking at it from the perspective of like post-pandemic, we were at maybe 23 young people. We're now at 150, right? We're averaging around that. So it's a significant increase in the last few years. And I just want to understand what
That's more, that relates more to the raise the age legislation than the pandemic, that we have so many more young people with us. Nancy, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I will say that when Raise the Age was first enacted, the numbers were very, very low. And then as we saw COVID kind of overtake the city, those numbers started to rise. Almost 80% of the young people who are in detention are facing charges in the adult court system. And so those charges tend to be much more serious. Some of those young people have been through other systems and have not succeeded. And because the cases that are more serious, they just take more time to get through the court system. There are a vast number of due process considerations for those young people. They're facing adult sentences, and the protections that are due to them may result in a longer stay until their cases are resolved.
Do you capture what the offense is? Do we know what percentage of young people detained were incarcerated for or detained for possession of a weapon?
We do.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
18% of the youth in secure detention, and this is the entire number, this is not just adult court kids. 18% are facing assault charges, 15% robbery charges, 14% possession of a weapon, 13% are there on murder-related charges, so that's either attempted murder or murder. And then there are a whole list of charges in the single digits or less than 1%.
Okay.
And Chair, if I just might add, this significant change in our system is one of many reasons that we asked Nancy to join us, because she has so much experience in working with young people who are facing charges in Supreme Court, in the youth part in Supreme Court. Obviously, Raise the Age led to this significant change. We are glad that the young people are with us, that 16 and 17-year-olds are coming to ACS facilities, but bolstering our expertise and our support to them is vital.
Well, congratulations on the hire. I hear that she's great.
Thank you.
Just to give you some perspective and maybe to make you feel slightly better about where we are in the continuum of history, in 2014, pre-Raise the Age, there were 700 16 to 18-year-olds on Rikers.
Yeah.
So those numbers were tremendous. And as we moved into Raise the Age, there was actually a kind of intentional decarceration of young people in the court system. And so, of course, we don't ever want to see any young person incarcerated, but we are optimistic that we will be able to see those numbers reduce in the future. And as we come out of COVID, and hopefully as our communities get healthier, we'll see those numbers drop even further.
And
This is combined with a 90% increase of young people who were upstate
yeah.
and now are in our close-to-home programs. It was over 500 upstate. Now we've got about 63 in close-to-home.
And how many young people have transitioned over from one of the two facilities to Rikers in the last year? Do you know?
A de minimis number, a very, very small number. So after sentencing, they go, if they're under 21, they'll serve their sentence until they're 21 with the Office of Children and Family Services. And then they would go to adult prison following that, depending on their sentence.
So that transition that you're referring to, I'm assuming when the kids came from Rikers to Horizon, when they turned 18, the pre-Raise the Age kids, when they turned 18, they were sent back to Rikers. That's not happening anymore. So that, because that population no longer is in our custody, any young person who is detained with us can stay with us by law until they turn 21.
Yeah. I think we should raise that to 26, but that's just me. When you walk into Rikers and you look into the faces of these young people, they look like babies.
That is aligned with the brain science. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm concerned about, and I know that you mentioned, Commissioner, in your testimony about post-attainment life and what that looks like. I think one of the biggest concerns is that young people that are leaving, I guess, and waiting for a court date are getting involved in other criminal activities, and I would love to know what the recidivism rates are, and what that post-attainment life looks like. I know that you mentioned partnerships with SAVE, Wagoso, and
Man Up.
Yeah, and Man Up. But what type of services are they offering these young people to ensure that they're not, re-engaging in activity that may get them into trouble?
So youth have access to our full continuum of programming. In Close to Home, there is a dedicated aftercare component. And so the young people who their sentence is typically about a year's time. They'll do some of that in placement, and then they'll be working on aftercare, and they get the continued support of the provider agency. This is also, we agree with you, this is also why it's so important to us that we expand Fair Futures so that we can make that commitment to young people post-detention or post-placement.
Okay, and what is, do you capture the rate of recidivists?
We do. I'll have to get
Okay.
that to you, but we do. We
Yeah,
watch it
that
closely.
information is super helpful because as we start to, better prepare in our own communities, and to try to engage young people and keep them off the streets specifically in the summer, we're really excited about the additional SYEP slots. Obviously, young people that are engaged are less likely to get in trouble, but there is, a lot of concern around young people that, are maybe, court involved, have maybe a gun-related charge, and then are trying to reintegrate into their communities. We worry about their safety. We worry about them, about them getting involved in other things, and so that data really kind of helps us to gauge where we are. And where we should be focusing our attentions. Now, I know that one of the biggest hurdles that we were facing in the beginning of the year was staffing shortages, and I know that every single city agency is going through the same thing, so this is not specific to ACS. But how are we doing in terms of the hiring of the youth development specialists?
We're working really hard at it. So we've got one class that is starting imminently, and a second class that will be starting over the summer. Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg and I were able to observe some of their simulation training recently, and we're really, really pleased with of that training. We have currently about 400 active YDS, so we have made some progress there. Thanks to the administration and OMB for their support of what we call our retention and attendance bonus, which provides an additional bonus on top of salary if staff stay on for a 6-month period and meet an attendance threshold. And so that has reduced our attrition by about 36%. We still have a ways to go, and we're working on bringing on classes every single month, and making sure that they're going through the training and support that they get. A big, in addition to the training, one of my priorities since I've been here, and certainly Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg, since she's been here for a couple months, has been to be out and to be in conversation with staff. We've held, I think, half a dozen town halls. We have town halls next week, again, both in partnership with 371 and actually the Justice Center, because our staff asked if they could hear directly from the Justice Center about their process, because it's one of the fears that they carry with them every day. And the Justice Center was open to collaboration and is going to be coming to present to our staff next Tuesday and Wednesday at Crossroads and Horizon. And we will be there, responding to make sure that they have the equipment that they need, being responsive to any needs that they have, whether it be around workers' compensation, incorporating their ideas into what we're doing in the buildings. We've got folks who have been doing this work for many, many years, and I'm not going to substitute my judgment for their wisdom and what they do. So really trying to integrate their ideas into the day-to-day, both programming and how we respond to young people, and being there for them when they have challenging moments. Our staff get injured in this work, and we deeply appreciate how they put themselves on the line to protect young people and to protect other staff. When they get injured, they're getting a call from me. They're getting support from us. They're making sure that HR is really responsive to all of their needs. And so we got to keep at this to make sure that we're building the culture of responsiveness that they need, so that they can build the culture in the buildings that is, optimal for both young people and families.
What is the length of time that a staffer is out, after an injury?
It's all dependent on the injury. I have to say, many of our staff are back and trying to get back in the building when we're saying, hold on, make sure you're doing okay. We have a lot of dedicated staff, but it is dependent on the injury. Some of them are serious and some of them are minor. So,
I'm assuming and I'm hoping that it's nowhere near what we're seeing at Rikers Island with the OC officers have been out for 2 years. So I'm trying.
I don't have that comparison, but I think the more lengthy periods are closer to a year than anything beyond.
Do you know what the percentage of specialists out today is?
We have about 30%.
30% are out?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we have about 600 staff who are active staff, or sort of are hired, that are YDS specialists, about 400, a little over 400 of them that are active. We have continued headcount to go beyond that,
Okay.
to continue to hire, and we're working very closely with OMB and others to make sure that we can continue to do that hiring.
So does that mean that the youth development specialists are still working 12-hour tours?
It does. We are, one of the things that I looked at upon my arrival, was whether the 12-hour tours was right. There were some advantages. Staff worked just 4 days instead of 5 days. After lots of conversation with staff, especially some senior staff, we came to the conclusion that 8-hour tours were the right. At the same time, the union was pursuing a grievance and was successful in that grievance. So we are now partnering together to plan a safe return to 8-hour tours, which I think will be more sustainable for our staff. It's the right way to go. We obviously have to continue to hire to make sure that we can do that safely, but we are in one accord with the union that 8-hour tours are right, and we're aiming towards the early fall to do so.
And how big is each class that's, you mentioned that there's an ongoing class now, right, that should be graduating soon?
Yep.
How
just
big is that class?
I believe that class is a little over 20. We are aiming for 25. We sometimes during training learn, that it's not a match, but we're always, every month we're looking for about 25, to bring on 25.
So what do you think is deterring? I mean, I was looking at it while we were doing our research for today's hearing, and the average salary, comparable to the experience necessary to do the work, seems, fair. What do you think is preventing folks from applying for these positions? And what is ACS doing to other, aside from the $5,000 bonus, which I think is a great incentive, but, what other avenues are you pursuing to engage?
Yeah. So we have an extensive marketing campaign to make sure that our needs are known across the city, and we are getting candidates and we are bringing folks in. I think my focus has really been not only on hiring but on retention, and I think many of the things that we talked about earlier are vital. That staff feel responded to, that they see us in the buildings with them, that they feel that they get the absolute support, and I'm proud of this administration and what we've been doing to bring that to bear. And I think in addition to the retention bonus, I think those efforts to make sure that they have what they need, equipment and otherwise, and support when things are difficult, will lead us in the right direction.
Yeah.
Can I just add something?
Sure.
I was on a call yesterday with statewide detention leaders, and this is not just a New York City issue. Everyone in the state running detention centers is struggling with this issue. So this state is bringing us together to try to brainstorm and find best practices and see what might be working in jurisdictions, but I think this is a shared struggle that perhaps we may come out of as we hopefully ease out of COVID.
Yeah,
Nationally as well.
we're hoping.
It's a struggle across the country.
Yeah, we're hoping. I had a question and it just flew out of my mind. Oh, it was around the mental health stuff. So you mentioned that 90% of the young people, detainees, are actually voluntarily seeking mental health services, which is great. I wonder I would like to know how much of a young person's time is spent outdoors as opposed to, in other recreational activities inside.
Yeah, so it's 2 hours per day. I'm going to ask Associate Commissioner Barrios, who leads our programming, to share a little bit more about how long they are outdoors and what they get to do outdoors.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hi, member. So the youth are required to receive a minimum of 2 hours of recreation per week. Youth are exposed to a variety of moderate or vigorous intensity aerobic physical activities, including aerobic fitness, strength training, core and large muscle exercises, balance training, and stretching. Youth receive those activities outdoors. There's the option of utilizing the main yard as well as the courtyard, weather permitting. The main yard includes green space and areas for basketball and handball and seating areas where youth can interact with their peers or staff and engage in things like playing cards or board games. We also utilize the gym or the courtyard for structured sports activities, including yoga and large muscle exercise.
Just a quick clarification, it's 2 hours per day for the recreation. We actually held this amazing event last week in Brooklyn for the young people. Cure Violence providers came. There was food provided and counseling and spoken word.
Yeah.
And it all took place outside. It was
That's
really
great.
nice for the young people.
Yeah, that's great. I'm claustrophobic. I couldn't imagine being detained all day. It would drive me nuts. So I could only imagine that leads to other, difficulties within the system, right? If young people are not feeling like they're getting that energy out. So I really appreciate that. Is there any workforce development training or opportunity tied to any of this programming that's going on?
Yes, so we have, over the years, exposed kids to a number of vocational programs. These are much smaller programs, but as the commissioner indicated earlier in his testimony, we are in the process of releasing an RFP for workforce development with the infusion of Fair Futures. And that's going to be a very comprehensive program that will address things such as career readiness, vocational training leading to certification, apprenticeships and internships, and then there's a labor marketing component. Because at the end of all of that, the important thing is how do we connect young people to jobs
That's
or
right.
career opportunities. But in the meantime, we are supplementing that either through contracts that we have with the Center for Community Alternatives, through a partnership with DYCD, as well as other contracts that are managed by CCA through a separate funding stream.
Do you have any idea what type of vocational programming you will be providing? Like on what areas are of interest?
That's a good question. So we released a concept paper in preparation for the release of the RFP. We're leaving it to the industry experts, and when we were conceptualizing the concept paper and the RFP, we pulled together a focus group of all of our workforce development partners to tell us what works and what doesn't. So currently we're offering things like OSHA, we've offered barbering, we've been doing a barista program, which initially started with a vendor, and now our program counselors have been facilitating that activity, and that leads to certification. So there's a whole variety of other opportunities that have yet to be finalized. With the release of the RFP, will we have a better sense of what will be available in the future?
And Chair Ayala, if I may, I think that one thing we've learned through Fair Futures is that when young people are engaged, this city has a lot to offer through CUNY, through our workforce providers, and so we see it as vital as starting with motivation interviewing. What do they want to do? So every young person will get a plan that's based on their interests, right? So motivational interviewing assumes everyone wants to do well and then creates a plan around those interests. And so in addition to the workforce that we'll provide, we're going to make sure that they have access to the full plethora of resources in the city.
Yeah, that's really important to me. When we were talking about the Close Rikers campaign, we did a lot of town halls with young people, and when we asked them, how do we build communities around, right, a facility like this? How do we ensure that the next generation doesn't end up in those facilities? Like what kids were asking for were garbage cans and programs to remove dead animals from their communities, a lot of conversations around garbage. And I find that, because they haven't been exposed to other things citywide. And I say that as a kid who grew up in the Lower East Side, who never went into a museum, who had no exposure to the arts whatsoever. I think we camped at Woodlawn Cemetery with a couple of friends, not even realizing that it was a cemetery. So that is a funny, but yet not so funny illustration of how limited our how our outreach into our city is. And so when we talk about workforce development, my concern is always, to ensure that we are also offering and being a little bit proactive and in offering positions or making available programs that lead to, middle-class jobs, right? And so I know that some of our kids are gonna wanna, may wanna be barbers, and I know that some of them may wanna go into, maintenance fields, and those are all great jobs. However, I saw at Horizons, we were doing, they were planting food, right? Agriculture is huge. We have urban farms coming up throughout the city. Those are really wonderful opportunities that expose young people to things that, they're not familiar with, that are pipelines to really good jobs. And so, in my mind, I try to be very, purposeful, in ensuring that I'm hearing from them, right? What are your interests, but that I'm also, exposing them to opportunities that may not be within their reach because they haven't been exposed yet. I think that is important as well. So I would love to see a little bit of that.
I had very similar experiences in our youth programs in Hunts Point and Manhattanville when I was at Graham Windham, and so everything that you're saying resonates. Our model of work is to engage young people where they are, assume that they want to do well, and they do, and then continue to sort of build on success, right? And then the sky's the limit. So you just, if they start with a barber because that's where their interest, then you expose them to business development, then you expose them to entrepreneurship.
How do you own that business?
Exactly.
Right? Exactly.
And so we absolutely see, and this is why we want to be with kids until 26, is because it takes time for them to build on that success. They have access to CUNY and to other resources, as I was mentioning earlier, but we are of one accord on that.
That's wonderful.
We've also opened conversation with District 79 to see if it's possible to push in tracks from Co-op Tech into the detention facilities. So we are exploring that.
That's
and
wonderful.
Hopefully we will have some good news on that.
Yeah, I mean, and exploring other partnerships. I think we in East Harlem, Strive is one of our partners, and they were working with Mount Sinai Hospital. So Mount Sinai Hospital would identify an area where they needed, staffing, phlebotomists, for instance, and then Strive would train phlebotomists, and then Mount Sinai would commit to hiring those phlebotomists. So, those partnerships work really well, and again, they expose young people to alternatives that, to really good jobs.
Yeah.
And my final question, because I want to allow my colleagues to ask questions, is so you mentioned that 89% of young people held in these facilities are men, well, young boys. So I'm assuming that the remaining percentages are young women. I haven't heard much said about the young women in your facilities.
Yeah. Today, I believe we have 2 young women in our facilities. They receive the full plethora of opportunities in the facilities. They are housed on their own hall and have very tailored programming to meet their needs as well. We're glad that there's only a couple young women with us. They have obviously tailored services around their mental health and around their interests. And they have great role models of young women of women in our YDS and special officer roles. So it's a absolutely keen attention on them. They obviously have a more intensive ratio of staff because we have to have 2 staff on every hall, no matter the number of kids, and so they get lots of attention. We got to meet with the 2 young women, I guess it was a couple weeks ago now, and they were very engaged with their staff. And they, I was impressed how much our staff knew about their stories, their interests, so their needs are absolutely being met.
That's great. That's great. I appreciate that. All right, I will pause and allow for staff for the other members to ask questions. I think we have Councilmember Williams, Councilmember Osei, Councilmember Caban, and Stevens if she comes back.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Just following up on the Chair's question around staffing, I know KPMG was hired to assist, and so just wanted to kind of understand their role, their new role. It was also said that their contract was extended.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we have a small contract with KPMG to help us do analytics, to help us look at recruitment, and they've been very helpful. It's a fairly small engagement with them, but the previous commissioner thought it was important, and we have found great success to get their advice around sort of recruitment practices. They also have been very helpful around project management and making sure that we stay on task across ACS or HR and finance. And so we've extended it for this current year, and we'll continue to evaluate the success of that engagement.
Okay. And I know you said you work with Cure Violence programs. Can you detail exactly what they're doing in the centers?
Sure. So they are on the halls with young people. They are doing violence interruption. They are doing direct mentoring with young people. They keep connections after young people are with us. Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg or Charles, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So we've been partnering with the Cure Violence organizations for a number of years now. We started the partnership with discretionary funding that was provided to us through the City Council, and over the past couple of years, have been working closely with MOCJ. As the Commissioner indicated, these organizations and their staff of violence interrupters and critical messengers have been critical to our operations simply because they know how to engage the kids. Now, we have providers that come into the secure detention facilities to provide services on site, but those services are also provided in the community by the same credible messenger staff, and we leverage other resources available through their organizations so that there's continuity. The other Cure Violence organizations support our youth both in close-to-home and community-based alternatives. They are grounded in the community. They work in the communities to engage kids. Again, some of these organizations partner with other organizations to make sure there's continuity and to leverage other resources. So they are very hands-on. They were with us last week during our Unheard event at Crossroads.
I was just going to ask if the violence interrupters that you mentioned that are in the halls, are they there all the time, full-time, or are they only there a certain portion of the day?
So at the two facilities, they each have approximately 3 to 4 staff that go into the facilities full-time. They are flexible as such that when we need them there, in the event we need them to do crisis mediation, they will deploy staff into the facilities. So they are embedded in the facilities, and they are part of the detention milieu.
Would you say that's helped with a lot of the security issues that staffers have reported?
So the credible messengers are tapped by facility leadership and operations to engage in crisis mediation and conflict resolution. And generally, when there are incident debriefs, we pull in our credible messenger staff to help us explore ways and strategies to address some of those issues.
Okay, switching gears a little bit. I don't think I heard this question asked, but if it was asked, we can skip it. How many COVID-19 related deaths have occurred in juvenile detention facilities since the beginning of the pandemic? This would be inclusive of both youth and staff members.
Thankfully, we did not lose any young people. We have lost 5 staff, 4 of which were confirmed COVID-19. This all preceded this administration, but I understand that there was an outpouring of support to those staff's families, and it was a very, very difficult time, but the agency responded to provide as much support as we possibly could in those tragic situations.
Okay, and what is the status of construction at the facilities?
So we are doing constant maintenance, and so we have staff who are dedicated to the facilities for all maintenance. We also have, Councilmember Williams, what's called RTA 2.0, which is a major overhaul of both facilities. It's a very complicated $340+ million effort to expand programming in the facilities. It's a multi-year effort because obviously we have to build it while the young people are there, but we're really pleased that our work with the Department of Design and Construction is going well, and we've got vendors who have, are doing the design, and so we have real ambitions to completely overhaul the buildings.
Okay. Chair, may I ask one more question? Turning attention to Intro 139, in your testimony, you stated a few things. One, that you felt the law would violate confidentiality, and then also that you don't have the proper system to record the information. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about that? Is it that you wouldn't be able to comply with the law at all, or would it be compliance with the law? Would it just be a challenge?
So we're, happy to negotiate this with the council. We absolutely agree that this is vital, that young people who've lost a caregiver to COVID have all of the supports that they need. I think there's a couple things. One is it's a smaller number than I think any of us would have imagined. And I think there's a lot to learn in that about the resilience of families and communities, but also at the same time, how much support they're gonna need from our full continuum. And so we wanna make sure that all families know about our continuum. The small number does raise potential confidentiality issues we always have to be careful about. But also just this sort of ongoing reporting requirement without a state system that actually tracks that is a burden that we'd rather use, those resources to provide services, but we're happy to continue conversations about it because we absolutely agree that it's imperative that young people get the services that they need, and families who are now providing care to children without their initial primary caregiver get everything that they need.
So because the number of parents who have passed away is so low, are you suggesting that it is maybe not necessary to collect this data because the numbers are so low? Like there's not an extensive list of children that need to be serviced?
I'm saying that I don't want to in any way diminish for those 8 children who lost a caregiver and came to our attention. So I'm not saying that it's not vital. We just want to negotiate the best way not to have too much of a burden for a small number, that we could use those resources for something that gets services out, that's all.
Right, like could it be a better way to share information on those 8 families versus a rule that would require or compel you to present the data?
That's right.
Okay, and I look forward to holding you to your offer to invite us to the Harambe event.
Wonderful.
And thank you.
And Councilmember, I just wanted to say we said it one-to-one, but thank you for your office's partnership around baby formula. I was really glad to hear that we maybe filled part of your office with lots of boxes.
Yes, it's too many boxes in my office. It's quite
Yeah.
a mess. But thank you so much for partnering with us.
Councilmember
Good
Oseki,
problem.
I just want to piggyback off of something that Councilmember Williams asked. So the legislation is specific to Councilmember Burrow's piece of legislation is very specific to the number of children who have lost a caregiver due to COVID that are within the system. But what is the total, do we know what the total number, do we even capture the data of children that are in care, right? Who've lost a parent, maybe not to COVID, but while in care? Is that number greater than if we...
So what I have for you today is related to COVID, but we can get you information on sort of so in care. There's 21 young people who lost a foster parent. Amazingly, almost all of them are now in the care of a foster parent's relative, someone who lived in the home. Or someone we call a backup, which is for every young person in care, for every foster family, there is a backup caregiver. So if they go on vacation or they're busy at work or whatever they need, and that is a person who's screened and has all of the clearances. And so they also have been a big part of that. So we can get you the full numbers around young people in care who have lost parents.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you so much, and good morning still. I can't believe it's still the morning. I do have a couple questions in regards to the detention facilities. On average, how long are juveniles in pre-hearing detention until their case is heard?
Can I ask you to clarify, when you say pre-hearing detention, do you mean before the first time they see a judge?
Yes.
Okay, so young people who have cases pending in the adult court system, they are either held or they're held by a judge and then they come to us. So they have all already seen a judge before they're either held on bail or remanded to our custody. Juvenile delinquents move differently. Those are kids who are in family court. The police, after an arrest, can bring a child to our custody, and the next morning they are seen by a judge, and there is a release decision made by the court. The other way a child can be arrested, if it's during court hours, the police can produce that child directly to the family court, and then a release or detention decision will be made. So it's quite quick. We're not like other jurisdictions where children linger in detention for weeks or months before they see a judge.
Thank you for clarifying that. And this may be out of your purview, but is detention the absolute last resort for juvenile? And if not, what are some other non-carceral alternatives for youth? And are most youth being given these alternatives as opposed to incarceration?
So I can respond to this. I have 30 years, so I can actually give you a historical picture.
Amazing.
When I first started, I started in family court, then switched to criminal court. I think the default was incarceration. In those years, we had many, many, many children who were held in detention. And I think that we have seen tremendous progress in that area over the years. And along with Raise the Age, that boosted that progress. So I can say from a court perspective that there are very few young people who are being detained in relation to the entire system. So I do think judges have gone through extensive training. Prosecutors have gone through extensive training. The defense bar has always been advocating for release. And we are really seeing the fruits of that type of orientation. And so the city has supported an increasing number of alternative to detention and incarceration programs, both for family court and the criminal court involved youth. And so I do think that for the most part, it's not absolute because ultimately the decision is the judge's, but we have seen an increasingly reduced number of young people coming into detention.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that response. I hope we could get to, a zero eventually.
Yes, share that.
I do want to ask, what happens when there are undocumented juveniles? And more specifically, how are they processed in the system? Especially knowing some of the concerns that we have about ICE in the city. I would just love some clarity on our undocumented juveniles that are taken into these facilities.
The juvenile system does not interact with that system. Children come into our custody, there is no notification. So they're protected.
Okay. And what is the protocol for de-escalating conflicts in juvenile facilities?
So we use something called Safe Crisis Management, and so it trains primarily in de-escalation techniques, and obviously using, in the first instance, relationship, making sure that there's lots going on for young people, that they're engaged. If something is escalating, to de-escalate, to have conversation, to use verbal commands, and only if an incident is rising to a safety issue or potential injury do we then use restraints. And again, we absolutely do not use prone restraints, which is one of the restraints that have been seen to be dangerous, and so we...
Can you elaborate on what specifically those are?
Prone is essentially face down.
Okay.
Right, and so it's harder to sort of assess breathing, and so we absolutely make sure that the young people are never put in that type of situation.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Councilmember Caban?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know I don't have a ton of time, so I won't spend the entire 5 minutes saying this, but I just want to say that I'm very excited about the addition of Nancy Ginsburg to the team. We were former colleagues, but more than that, she was consistently a go-to person in our office for all things kids. And I have heard from my former colleagues, even just this morning, that the kind of communication and support that was provided in her days as a public defender is the kind of communication and support that is being provided right now. And that gives me a lot of hope and excitement for continued positive progress in the administration. So that's exciting to me. So thank you. I appreciate you. I have a number of questions. I think I want to start with some things on scope and capacity. I know that you touched on sort of like some of the older youth programming, and in particular, I'm interested in kind of the things like OSHA and trade programs and connections to local college opportunities and things like that. And I know that you described some of that, but I would like to get into the nuts and bolts in terms of, what the numbers are, how many young folks are being touched by that? Are there any gaps? And if there are gaps, like what are the resources that are needed? Do you need more staff? Do you need more resources? How can we expand the reach of these things so that every single person has access?
So access is universal to our young people to these programs, and I'll ask Associate Commissioner Barrios to speak to this in a moment. We are constantly assessing this. As you know, Council Member, with the change in Raise the Age, it really changed who we're serving in the detention centers, and so making the programming more robust and more relevant to young people at older ages is really vital. It's why we're doing the RFP around workforce development. It's why we're doing the work with Co-op Tech. Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg led a summit, if you will, with the DOE to rethink all that we can do for young people. I'll turn it to Associate Commissioner Barrios to just give a little more detail around what's current, but do know that we are constantly assessing how we can add and make sure that all young people have what they want and need in the detention.
And if I could just add to that question also of like, what's the tracking mechanism for the folks that are engaging in these programs and measuring sort of the continuity of of participation, and then even measuring sort of like the outcome and the long-term outcome for that young person?
So, and just to mention, the program counselor, so is a different role than the youth development specialists and special officers and other titles that you've heard. Program counselors are responsible for that as part of, and partner with case management folks who do a lot of the work around continuity. So I'll turn to Charles on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hello, Council Member.
Hi.
So I'd like to start with OD youth programming. The majority of the youth in our facilities now are skewing older. We have contracts in place for programming, again, through Community Center for Alternatives. We've recently embarked on an exercise to equalize programming at both facilities, as those services for OD youth were initially implemented at Horizon. It's the same vendor at both facilities, and so young people have the opportunity to engage in things like enrichment programming. But what's most exciting is, as of late, we've been introducing and exposing kids to college access programming. So we have partnerships with CUNY, primarily Kingsborough Community College and LaGuardia Community College. There have been a number of courses that have been implemented, and we have 2 courses that are being implemented over the course of the next couple of weeks. One is through Kingsborough. It's a college exploration course in real estate and construction, with additional courses being developed as we speak, and those are going to be implemented in the fall. We also entered into a partnership with Manhattan College, and we're excited about that. And so we'll be offering a college course in criminal justice ethics, and this is available to young people who have earned their diploma or GED diploma. The programs that I alluded to earlier that are offered through CCA, some of those also include things like OSHA, as you alluded to, barbering, other vocational offerings. but we're really looking forward to the implementation of the RFP, because that will enable us to provide a more comprehensive level of opportunities for people to access things like career readiness, college exploration, and specifically things that will enable them to get jobs once they are released and reintegrated into the community.
And to be clear, right, I understand the description of what is being provided, but I'm interested in a data set. I'm
Okay.
interested in being able
Yep.
to see what the numbers are and what the, and being able to measure that up to intended impact to actual impact. And so I would love to follow up to be able to get some of that information. I think, the anecdotes and descriptions are wonderful, but I would really like to see a hard data set on what we're seeing. And then, thank you, Chair, for giving me a little bit of extra time. I'm going to ask a quick series of questions that I hope that you can answer, as succinctly as possible. But, I want to know, shifting gears some, like, do you prevent kids from accessing telephones as punishment? And does lack of staffing affect ability of escort staff and therefore, limit programming off the hall? And then third, and this is a piece that I will commend progress on. The last hearing that I was at, I questioned the administration with a lot of concern because I was hearing, again, from former colleagues that children were getting a live instructor once a week and then getting handed packets for the rest of the week in terms of educational instruction. So I'm glad to hear that there is actually regular in-person teachers with the kids. But to follow up on that, now that there is that return to in-person instruction, are kids required to go to school and sit before that instruction? So those 4 questions. So yeah, thank you. Or 3 questions, I'm sorry.
So I'm going to start with the education piece. As you know, education has been one of the primary focuses of my career. It was very important when I came in. We scheduled and held the Education Summit with District 79. Leadership from District 79 came. The principals, building leadership came. We held it at Co-op Tech. Everyone got a tour of Co-op Tech after. We are being very intentional about creating prongs that we can use going forward where we can look at individualized needs of the young people. There are many of our kids who have been disconnected from education, for some of them for years before they came to us. It is not realistic to expect them to engage 5 days a week for a full school day. Our goal is to really meet the young people where they are, to support them with the goal of getting them to participate all day, every day, understanding that some of our young people have special needs. Some of our young people are going to need one-on-one. The infusion of tutoring has been tremendously helpful in providing that one-on-one for young people who don't learn well in a group setting. And we are going to continue being very intentional about looking at the various ways we can meet young people's individualized educational needs. And we actually started a conversation about, whether or not a classroom setting is actually appropriate for all of our young people, and if there are different ways that we can provide education so that they can meet their attainment goals while still ensuring that their individual needs are met. So hopefully we will have lots to report going forward on this. The young people are engaging with their teachers. We are planning meetings throughout the summer so that we are able to hit the ground in September, and hopefully by mid-fall we'll have some positive reports for you.
Thank you. And then just to do the follow-up on the other 2 questions, specifically asking whether kids are being prevented from accessing phones as part of punishment, and then does the lack of staffing affect availability of escort staff and then therefore limit programming off the hall?
During COVID, it had a huge impact. So staffing, not only the numbers of YDS and special officers, but whether they were available to be in the building. There was lots of times where quarantine was necessary. We are working through that and are getting kids to school and to their program at a much higher rate. It is something where
What's that rate?
I don't have the exact percentage for you, but we'd be happy to follow up on all of that.
Please, yeah, thank you.
I think, again, going back to what Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg said, our young people need to be engaged. They, in the morning, getting them to school as a whole is something our staff are really committed to. They're waking them up, they're getting them ready, and so if they know what they're going to is individualized and what they care about, we think we'll see a much improved rate. Around the phone calls, taking phone calls away is never a punishment. They have a minimum number of phone minutes that they absolutely get, and in our Strive program, they continue to earn more minutes as they escalate along the behavior continuum. Excuse me.
Just to add to that, I have been attending the resident councils. These kids are very excellent self-advocates, and they have been asking us to consider increasing the base number of calls or the number of minutes that they can earn. So we are considering all of their requests, and we hopefully will have something to report soon on that.
Thank you.
And excuse me, yes, I just wanted to be very clear that our young people's communication with their families is vital, and with friends, et cetera. So phone calls are something that they are constantly focused on, and we are focused on. We are not going to use that as a form of punishment.
Thank you. And thank you for the extra time.
Councilmember Stevens.
Hi, good afternoon. Wait, what time? Yeah, good afternoon. I just have a few questions. And so I always like to just ask around like preventative measures, like even before the young people get there. Because one of the things that I've found in the past, working with young people and families, a lot of time families will come to ACS to get services, and there's so many roadblocks put up that they end up in the detention center. So if there's any way for you to talk about, like, what are some things that parents can do or you guys offer to actually really make sure that they're preventative? Because I've had so many times where parents have like went to ACS and be like, I need help, I need, support, whether it's like, helping them get evaluated or different things, and it's a lot of roadblocks that's put up. So if any way you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure, thank you, Councilmember Stevens. So in 2021, we served about 1,000 young people in community-based alternatives. Our family assessment program and JJI are robust programs with community, and we also partner with community-based organizations. So they're in each borough, and they are available to families. There's a continuum of therapeutic interventions. We are also adding Fair Futures to that. I know that a lot of families come, and we want there to be a full family intervention, but they also want their young people to have coaching and those kinds of services. And so we're going to attach Fair Futures to our MAP programs, which are mentoring and advocacy. And we want families to know that these services are free, they're voluntary, they're available. It's led by Associate Commissioner Ray Toomer is here. I'm sure we could continue in conversations about that. But this is one of the ways I think we've dramatically decreased the number of young people coming into care that Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg was referencing. FAP is available outside of the court system, and JJI is for young people who are designated juvenile delinquents and at adjudication. They come to JJI rather than going to placement like close to home.
Yeah, no, I just had so many encounters where families would look for services and, go and they would be like, oh, you have to get the guardianship and all these different things and all these different barriers. And so just really thinking about how we even trying to prevent this and working with families so that young people don't have to end up in the detention centers.
And can I just say really quickly, Councilmember, if you have anybody who runs into such a situation, we'd like to know right away. It's a real commitment of mine to ease pathways to our prevention services, both in our child welfare and juvenile justice continuums. It should not be difficult to access. This administration is really committed to that access, and we have available services, and we'd really love to hear if anybody's running into any challenges in that regard.
No, absolutely. I will definitely connect. I mean, this was more when I was in direct service, but there's been quite a number of families that I know who's had multiple issues of just getting any services, going to court and trying to, do the different things and take the avenues. And then, their young people ended up in a detention center. So just another question I have is around we know that when anyone goes into a detention center or anything like that, it affects the whole family. What specific services do you offer to families while young people are in detention centers? Because sometimes even that is traumatic, and if you offer any at all. Because I know there's aftercare sometimes for families, but is there anything being offered to families while their young people are serving to kind of help them and support them?
So we have case managers in each building. They're assigned to each child, and they are the conduit to the family members. And they can take calls from families. They report out information to the family members about young people's progress or struggles they might be having. They might facilitate treatment team conferences. If a child has a particular issue, they coordinate with the Bellevue Mental Health team to ensure that parents are aware of the services being provided. The Bellevue Mental Health team also contacts parents and are in communication with parents about the treatment that young people are getting. And each site has parent advocates, and there is an ombudsperson in each building that is available for parents to contact.
Yeah, and those are great. Obviously, those things are needed. But just thinking about some other things around like parent support groups, or things like that, are things that I think are important, and we should be thinking about as well, because it's a hard task, and a lot of times these parents have gone through so much, and having their child there, whether that's like counseling or support services, is something I think is something we should definitely be thinking about as well. And if the chair allows, I just have one more question. I know we talked about staffing and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about what that training looks like for the staff, and what, what's being offered for them to be able to work with young people around like therapeutics, and like what are some of the requirements and candidates that you're looking for?
Sure. So it's a 6-week training course. They start with 2 weeks in our James Satterwhite Academy. They come to the detention facilities for 2 weeks and do on-the-job training. This is important, right? A lot of folks will say, oh, training was very different than, so it's woven in, and then 2 weeks they go back into the academy. It's many of the things that you mentioned. It's around engaging young people. It's around creating safer environments and supervision. It's around de-escalation. In addition to what it trains, it's really important to share with you how. In addition to the on-the-job training, ACS has a simulation where staff are really working with paid actors who get to know. They've all been in the facilities. They've all learned about it, and they get to know. They represent young people, some who might have a special need. They represent young people who might struggle with anger. And we got to watch, actually last week with the deputy mayor, the new IDS going through this, and then they debrief and learn. So it's, in addition to the content, the sort of practice modality of continuing to get to practice and debrief and actually watch themselves go through this process has been really powerful.
And what qualifications does one need to have? And because even with that training, like, and it's only 6 weeks, like, what qualifications does one need to have to do this work?
Most important, obviously they go through an extensive background process and an extensive interview and sort of skill-based review to make sure that they have the skills. But we're looking first and foremost for people who believe in young people, who care about them, who have a rapport with them, who young people can see. Sometimes they're from the communities that young people are from, that they can connect with them. So we really want to, first and foremost, make sure that young people have in their living spaces every single day adults that they can look up to. And so we have a whole process of making sure that we're evaluating that. They get evaluated through the training process. Having this training process before they come into the work is really vital, because it also gives us a chance to observe their tendencies and whether they really are fit for the job. We can get you the exact qualifications beyond that, but again, it's really, is this someone who's going to develop a strong relationship with young people and be a role model for them?
And just one more question, I'm sorry. And how many social workers or psychiatrists and things like that are at each facility?
In all of the domains that we described earlier, sort of program counselors, case managers, our Bellevue and Floating Hospital, there's a range of professionals. There's psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. So across the continuum, I don't have the exact number for you, but they are integrated, lots of professionals, again, social workers and other behavioral health and medical professionals are integrated into both of the buildings.
Okay. And you don't have the exact numbers. Is by any chance, would you be able to get it to the committee after? Thank
Sure,
you.
we can take a look at that for sure.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ressler?
Thank you, Chair Ayala, and it's good to be with you, Commissioner. Congratulations again on the appointment. I think that the mayor made an inspired choice at ACS, and congratulations to Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg and the whole team. And I want to especially shout out former colleagues Jill Krause and Stephanie Gundel. You guys do a phenomenal job, so we see you and appreciate you. And I would be totally remiss to not say something that is nothing in relation to this hearing, but is the primary issue that I interface on ACS on, which is childcare. Appreciate your leadership on that. We would love to do some sort of recurring check-in with folks from your team just to make sure that we're getting information out to our community. But thank you again for prioritizing vouchers. We greatly appreciate everything that has been underway in the Adams administration on that front. Secure capacity. So firstly, congratulations on getting DOC out. That is a victory for all. And we are appreciative that Horizons and Crossroads are now fully under the control of ACS. That is a good thing for our young people. I know that was no easy feat, and you and your teams deserve a great deal of credit for making that happen. My understanding, and I know that our distinguished chair went back and forth with you on this, is that you are at close to capacity in these facilities, or nearing capacity in these facilities. I'm particularly concerned about the longer stayers, and I was wondering if you could share any strategies for how we can do a better job of trying to get some of the older young adults who are in there for extended periods of time, especially out, and what we can do there, recognizing many of the young people who are there just in and out for a day or two.
So, Councilmember, first, thank you for your leadership and advocacy around childcare. We absolutely are committed to continuing to be in conversation with you as we work through the wait list and get many, many more families the childcare supports that they need and deserve. Each facility has a capacity of 106. So today, there are a little over 80 young people at Crossroads and about 60 or so at Horizon. So okay. we are not quite at capacities, thankfully. Clearly, the kids who stayed long times, and we're talking multiple years, as you may know, for some young people who were with us through the pandemic, we are seeing the courts move more quickly. Our role is to make sure that they have access to their attorneys, as Deputy Commissioner Ginsburg mentioned earlier, for due process, and that they're getting to court. We have a dedicated group of staff, our court services staff, that transport and make sure young people are safe. We have been working with the court system. We flag for them young people who have long lengths of stay that do not have upcoming court hearings in the near future. I have to say that Judge Mendelson-Richardson has been very supportive in that regard, and we are pleased to see the courts beginning to move more quickly.
Okay, if we can be helpful in advocating together, we're obviously happy to do so. I know that our colleagues in Albany added some family court capacity in the budget that was needed. I've been dismayed at the speed at which the courts have moved, both as it relates to our young adults and our adults. And people have been stuck in detention, stuck in jails that they should not be in, and I am deeply disappointed about it. As it relates to non-secure detention, where are we at capacity there? Are there any current plans to expand close to home, or is that not needed at this time?
We are in good shape on non-secure detention. So we have, I think we're at around 25% capacity for non-secure detention. For close to home, we really recently released the concept paper and are moving towards the RFP. We are reducing capacity there. We're really grateful to the mayor and to OMB to support using most of the money in the close to home continuum to make it a more robust and intensive. So as I mentioned in my testimony, we'll go from 12 youth per facility to 8 youth. We're adding lots of programming in there. We're adding the close to home work through the workforce RFP. So we were at 301 capacity close to home. We brought that down with a very small peg to about 293. But this RFP will have about 170. And again, we have about 63 young people who are in close to home today. It may still seem like a lot, but it is important that we meet all of the specialties, right? So we have to make sure that young people with different needs have the right facility for them, the right community, and obviously by gender as well.
That's great. And then the last question I just wanted to ask at the chair's discretion, of course, is, I'm concerned about the staff shortage. I'm also concerned about the number of workers that are consistently pulling 12-hour days. Do we have a timeline for when we can get these folks who have, gone above and beyond to an 8-hour day?
We are still in conversations with the union on that, but we are very close. We are aiming for early September to be able to do that. We did, in conversations with staff here, that they wanted us to be deliberate in that process. There's a whole process of choosing schedules by seniority. We have folks who have built their lives around the 4 days that will need to shift. And so we think we're close to an agreement, and we really appreciate 371's partnership on this to move back to September. That also gives us a little bit, but not much time to make sure that we bring as much staffing on as we can, because obviously the 3 tours instead of the 2 require more robust staffing.
Right. We're fortunate to have 371 as a partner because they are one of the unions who are mission-driven and care as much about expanding programming and providing quality services to our young people as they do about anything else. But, a 12-hour workday for years is profoundly straining for workers in highly intense situations. And so recognizing that you've faced staffing shortages and that it takes time to work these things out, I do hope that you will prioritize completing a transition to an 8-hour workday as quickly as possible for these people who have worked incredibly hard to support our communities.
Thank you, Councilmember. I couldn't agree with you more. Our staff have been extraordinary through the pandemic, doing 12-hour tours, sometimes working even more hours than that. When we talk to them in the town halls, we are thanking them directly. I will add your thanks to them. I know Chair Ayala was able to offer to them directly. I think we have to get to a place that is sustainable for our staff. They are the backbone of this work.
That's right.
So we are of one mind and accord on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I want to thank you for coming today. Obviously, we've learned a lot. We expect to get more information in the upcoming weeks. And I look forward to coming by this summer. I think maybe I'll invite some of the members of the committee
Please.
To come as well. And I know I owe you a visit in Brownsville as well. So thank you for being here today. And to the public, if there's anyone in the audience today that is in person that wishes to testify, please see one of the sergeants at arms. With that, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Really appreciate it.
All right, we are now going to move on to public testimony. And as of right now, all of those who have signed up for public testimony will be joining us virtually.
And with sort of oh shit, are they doing?
I am now going to call up the first panel. The first panel, and again, just a reminder that members of the public have 2 minutes to testify. You have 2 minutes to testify, but you can always, of course, submit your full written testimony after the hearing, 72 hours within the date of the hearing, at testimony@council.nyc.gov. So I'm going to call up our first panel. Our first panel is going to be in the following order: Hilela Simpson, followed by Lisa Freeman, followed by Jessica Prince. Over now to Hilela Simpson.
Time starts now.
Hi, my name is Halela Simpson. I am a trial attorney in the Juvenile Defense Unit at NYCDS. My colleagues and I represent children in felony raise the age cases in both Supreme Court and Family Court. I want to thank the committee and Chair Ayala for holding this hearing today and giving us an opportunity to comment on the issue of juvenile detention in New York City. We're also grateful to the mayor for appointing Nancy Ginsburg, and we look forward to continuing to work together. I want to start by saying that this is a racial justice issue. Black and Latina children are overrepresented in both the court system and detention, meaning that the harms that we're discussing today are being disproportionately borne by youth of color. This only serves to exacerbate existing racial disparities due to a lack of investment in the first instance in these young people's schools, health, communities, and futures. Our clients are generally between the ages of 14 to 18, and they're in a unique and important developmental stage at that point that will set the trajectory for the rest of their lives. Detention is harmful to this trajectory. It exacerbates existing mental and behavioral health problems. It increases the likelihood of depression, suicide, and self-harm. The lack of education within these facilities has caused children to fall behind or even further behind in school or disengage entirely. We are looking forward to the changes in in-person education that have been discussed here today. And I hope to have more of these hearings where we can update you on what education is looking like at Horizons and Crossroads as this new administration works to shift away from packets towards live instruction. Detention also necessarily means that our clients are being separated from their families and support networks, and we're concerned about the amount to which phone calls to family are severely limited.
Time expired.
Okay, are you ready to wrap?
If I can just conclude briefly.
Okay, thank you.
We're also concerned to the extent to which the numbers in detention are being increased by pretrial detention, especially in the youth part, and the inability for families to post bail, which is leading, and I think unnecessarily increasing the numbers of young people who are in these facilities. We're also very concerned about young people's guardians and their attorneys not being notified when there are incidents of violence in facilities, including when our young people are injured. And in conclusion, we would urge the council to think more boldly about rejecting detention as an appropriate place for young people and work with the city and state to divert children from a detention altogether. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I have a quick question before we jump over to the next panelist. Do you know what the time frame for the parental notification currently is when there's an injury?
My understanding anecdotally is that when we have found out about incidents happening and young people being physically harmed, we are finding out from the young person themselves and not from the facility.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Hilela. Now going to turn to Lisa Freeman for testimony. Over to Lisa.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, Chair Ayala, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to testify. My name is Lisa Freeman. I'm from the Legal Aid Society. Formerly collaborated quite closely with Nancy Ginsburg, and I'm also thrilled to have her in her new role. I'm the director of the Juvenile Rights Special Litigation and Law Reform Unit. We represent the majority of children charged as juvenile delinquents in family court, and our criminal defense practice represents the majority of those charged, of young people, of children charged in adult court, both as juvenile offenders and as adolescent offenders. So I want to just touch on a couple of points that some of which have been mentioned already. The lack of adequate staff in these facilities that has been acknowledged has been given rise to a variety of problems, some of which directly touch on the ability to have confidential attorney-client conversations with our clients. So normally case managers facilitate those calls, but that has not been happening because of staff shortages. And instead we wind up speaking with clients when they are in their halls, which are not confidential settings. We also, as the prior speaker mentioned, have difficulty hearing about incidents that affect our clients because of a shortage of staff, or what seems to be a shortage of staff, a lack of communication with case managers. Video conferencing, which have been going on since the pandemic, was ended about 6 months ago, and there are also delays when we actually go to visit in person. So all of these issues, we believe, arise from a lack of escort staff, but are really problematic. We also have been hearing about a lack of access to outdoor recreation and to programming for kids. Sorry,
Time expired.
If that's all right, I will conclude quickly. I did want to touch on the bill introduction 294. We support the bill, the provision of the disclosure to parents, but we would advocate that that include children as well, because children are in the same situation as parents and need to understand their rights in that setting when there's a child protective investigation. Finally, we would also just note that there's a lack of confidentiality in the detention facilities in the courthouses as well, and we would encourage the City Council to take a look at that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for your testimony. Now going to move to Jessica Prince for testimony. Over to Jessica.
Time starts now.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Jessica Prince, and I am Policy Counsel to the Family Defense Practice at the Bronx Defenders. I am here to testify about Intro 294. In his remarks, the Commissioner glossed over this bill and the importance of parents understanding an ACS investigation. In the past, ACS has actively opposed parents being made aware of their rights at the start of an investigation. I'm disappointed that the Commissioner did not state more explicitly what information he does not want parents to know. As practitioners representing parents accused of abuse and neglect, we bear witness to the harmful, inhumane ways that ACS disrupts the lives of New York families, particularly in low-income communities of color. The system is too quick to separate families and too quick to label parents as neglectful. Even when families are not separated, they are subjected to government intrusion and surveillance, violations of familial privacy and integrity that have consequences that long outlive the case. To begin to disrupt the harmful, long-lasting impacts of the family regulation system, we must embrace reforms that protect the rights of and shift power back to families. Intro 294 touches on this critical issue of parents being informed of their rights at the start of an ACS investigation. And in the past, advocates for parents have worked extensively with the Progressive Caucus of the City Council, on previous iterations of this bill, and we hope to continue working with you here to strengthen it. Rights are only meaningful if people are aware of those rights' existence. It is critical that these rights be communicated to parents both orally and in writing in the parent's preferred language. For that reason, this bill should require that when ACS first makes contact with a parent or caregiver, they inform them of several things.
Time expired.
If I could just finish quickly.
Go ahead.
They should inform them of several things. First, that the parent is not required to grant ACS entry to their home. That anything the parent says can and will be used against them in a family court or administrative proceeding. That they have the right to speak with an attorney. That they are not required to allow ACS to question their children or search their children's bodies. That they are not required to sign HIPAA releases or take drug tests or submit to mental health evaluations, and that there are legal offices offering representation during ACS investigations throughout the city, like the Bronx Defenders, Brooklyn Defenders, Neighborhood Defender Services of Harlem, and Center for Family Representation. An ACS investigation is a traumatic imposition on a family, and the only way we can begin to ensure that parents understand how to navigate these investigations is to make clear to them that they have rights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, for your testimony, and thank you to this entire panel for your testimony. I'm now going to call on our next panel, which is all going to be virtual as well. In the following order, panelists will be Amy Lynn, followed by Joyce McMillan, followed by Shalonda Curtis Hackett, and followed by Cassandra Gonzalez. Going to now begin with Amy Lynn. Over to Amy.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Lynn, and I'm a policy fellow at CACF, the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families. Thank you very much to Chair Ayala for holding this hearing and providing this opportunity to testify. Founded in 1986, CACF is the nation's only Pan-Asian children and families advocacy organization and leads the fight for improved and equitable policies, systems, funding, and services to support those in need. We are testifying today in support of Intro 294, and we thank the sponsors of this bill for bringing it forth. CACF has long worked with our member organizations and with ACS to address the challenges faced by API families in the child welfare system and language access, especially at the time of a child protective investigation. When language and cultural barriers are present, misunderstanding and delayed access to supportive services result in unnecessary trauma to children and families. In New York City, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, or AAPIs, are majority immigrant and have the highest rate of linguistic isolation of any group, as 46% have limited English proficiency, meaning that they speak English less than very well. Language barriers that exist within the child welfare system in New York City include a mismatch in interpretation services with requested language and dialect, a lack of quality interpretation and interpreter bias in working with families, delays in accessing interpretation and use of services like Google Translate in a pinch, and poor quality translations of written materials that do not convey information accurately. Limited access to culturally responsive and linguistically accessible services, especially at the first point of contact with the child welfare system, leads to misunderstandings of family needs and children's safety. We have heard from our member organizations of instances where, due to lack of language access and cultural humility, families' routine cultural practices have been misconstrued as abuse by child protective workers. In other situations, child protective services have missed accurate assessments of families' real needs and challenges. We would like to acknowledge the recent efforts of ACS to work with CACF and invite in and understand some of our AAPI community needs. Prior to COVID, CACF coordinated with ACS and our partner organizations to provide trainings directly in ACS Child Protective Field offices on working with diverse AAPI families. These trainings were very well received, and we hope to continue that work.
Time expired.
If I could just quickly wrap.
Sure.
Still, there remains much to be done, and multiple families are languishing because there is a lack of quality data and understanding of community needs. Despite local law 126 that called for city agencies to collect disaggregated data by ancestry and language, steps can still be made by ACS to improve data on families in touch with the system to ensure a proper response to their needs. All services should be linguistically accessible at all access points. City agencies must go beyond simple translation and interpretation services. Sustained oversight is needed to ensure that strategic policies and investments targeted at ameliorating the cultural gap between immigrant communities and child welfare systems are implemented. We are fully supportive of a law requiring ACS to provide a multilingual disclosure forum to parents or guardians during a child protective investigation and look forward to more partnership in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for your testimony. Now going to turn to Joyce McMillan for testimony. Over to Joyce.
Time starts now.
Morning. Thank you for this opportunity to testify here today. My name is Joyce McMillan. I am the Executive Director of JMAC for Families and the founder of Planned Parent Legislative Action Network, a coalition of advocates interested in making life better for families and children who become involved with the child welfare system. I'm here specifically to speak about Intro 294 and the importance of parents knowing their rights from the moment that CPS knocks. To follow up on Jessica Prince's testimony, I'd like to say one of the reasons people have been concerned about this legislation of advising people of their Fourth Amendment rights not to allow a government official into their home is because we hide behind the safety of a child. The safety of a child should not hinge on violating the Fourth Amendment rights of any American citizen. But furthermore, ACS is quite aware that it's not an emergency when they come to the home of a family and weaponize the armed forces, police, NYPD against families when they do know their rights and choose to exercise them. When you call the state central registry to place a concern about a family, the first thing that happens is a recording comes on that says, if this is an emergency, please hang up and call 911. The person remains on the line and speaks to an OCFS representative who takes the concern about the family. Up to 72 hours later, ACS responds. Therefore, there is no emergency, and they treat every situation as an emergency and act as though they have to get entrance to the home in that moment. It's not true. And I ask that this council stand with families and communities to stop, to prevent us from having our rights violated from these unnecessary invasive intrusions by ACS when they know there's no emergency of a child being at imminent risk of danger or harm. I would further like to ask the question of ACS, how many children in the foster home placement situation are transferred from foster home placement into the juvenile detention centers?
Time expired.
As children. And last, I would just like to say to the council, I had several parents who are on this call this morning text me during the testimony, and I would stand in agreement with them that the reassurance of ACS that they're doing a good job feels very unfair to us, and it borderlines feeling like fraternizing. And we would ask that at future hearings, we refrain from doing that because we don't get the same accolades when we come on and testify and share our stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce, for your testimony. I am now going to turn to Shalonda Curtis Hackett. Over now to Shalonda.
Time starts now.
Family regulation system known as ACS. My only offense was advocating against anti-Blackness, transphobia, and homophobia at my children's elementary school, PS 147 in Brooklyn. Exactly 1 year ago, my family was falsely accused of malnourishment and endangering our children. On June 8th, I received a call from a woman stating she was from ACS. She said she would have to come to my home and inspect my 2 children. She would not tell me what the allegations were for, but after repeatedly requesting, she eventually disclosed the reasons for her call. The language and amount of information she said was used in a reporting could only be stated by someone trained to know what would trigger an investigation. As a parent, my sole job is to protect my children. I was scared, angry, and disgusted that someone from their school would dehumanize our family because they didn't want to reconcile their complicity in white supremacy. Instead, they used a system rooted in white supremacy to attack my family. After several phone calls, I consented because I was threatened with the police and possible removal if I refused. With both evils being presented, I consented to what I thought was the lesser. Never once was I explained my rights, nor that I had the right to speak to an attorney. I was pressured into compliance. For 30 days, my family was involved in the system despite her saying herself that, in fact, this was malicious and my children were well taken care of. I, along with thousands of families, enter in this system under coercion, ill information, and ill-equipped to exercise our rights. Thus, this common sense bill does not create any new rights. It simply ensures that we have information about existing rights so that we can make informed decisions for our families. Parents need to know their rights from the very beginning. Had I known what I know now, I could have made informed decisions out of knowledge and not fear. This is a racial justice issue. I was targeted by a school and a Department of Education that serves Black and brown children on a silver platter to funnel through the family regulation system as property. While many may say my case is not severe, we should never have been in the system in the first place. And I personally know too many Black mothers and children who feel worse. Families who survive this system do not get shout outs or any recourse nor support from the trauma we experience at the hands of the family regulation system after our rights have been violated. All we are left with is the anxiety of being thrust back into the system at any given moment. I'm going to finish here. Again, I am asking that you support this bill and inform parents and caregivers of their rights from the very beginning and throughout, so we can make informed decisions that are best for our families.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shalonda, for your testimony. I am now going to turn to Cassandra Gonzalez for testimony. Over to Cassandra.
Hi, thank you. I also want to talk about Intro 294. Hi, my name is Cassandra Gonzalez. I identify as Afro-Latina. I live in NYCHA. I'm also a parent impacted by the child welfare system. I would have had loved to know my rights when ACS, between my lived experience and the stories that I have listened to from others, to go into my house during an investigation and it was neglected, not child abuse, for the ACS worker to say she's checking for marks and bruises, and every time, including taking off my son's pamper, had made me feel very uncomfortable. It was very uneasy. And when I was able to go and speak to someone about my rights the second time, when she asked, it was kind of like a little bit different. I would like to know that I am respected and knowledge of my rights, and that it would have been good to know what what my rights are, as far as what I'm allowed and what is not allowed for them to go and do when they enter into your home. Because as a woman of minority and having children of minority, it does make it, when you get that call and they come in, it's a different experience. I would like to thank you for your time and space to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you to this entire panel for your testimony. I'm now going to turn to our next panel. Our next panel, as far as who has registered, is Heather Imperial, Asia, Ife Adeniyi, and Desiree Wright. Now going to turn to Heather Imperial.
Starting time.
Thank you. I was just unmuted. I would like the committee to investigate the gross maltreatment of the parents who have been accused of neglect and/or abuse. In criminal court, innocence is presumed until guilt is proven. In family court, guilt is assumed, and when innocence is proven, prolonged agonizing separation is the go-to interim solution. And there are no apologies for the mountains of damage done to a person's children, personal life, livelihood, and family. ACS investigations are cruel and unusual punishment of overwhelmingly innocent human beings. The separation of a parent and child is wholly unnatural and the vast majority of the time unnecessary. The psychological damage done to children and babies separated from their parents is profound and lifelong. Investigators use scare tactics to pry irrelevant information out of terrified parents by telling them if they don't cooperate, they will have to remove their children. They take your kids anyway and use the information you've shared out of context to incriminate you, oftentimes exaggerating or flat out lying. My case planner lies under oath every time we're in court, and people within the system are trained to believe agency personnel over parents, which is downright wrong. There is little to no oversight, and where there is, it is insufficient. The psychological abuse goes on unfettered, empowering caseworkers to walk all over parents and children's rights. Addiction is criminalized. Poverty is criminalized. Parents are vilified for their communities falling short of providing for their basic human needs. Needing help for anything becomes a horrifying situation to be in, not only because you have a lack of ability to provide for your family, which is a scary feeling in and of itself, but because you know that asking for help is even more dangerous to your family's well-being. You hesitate and continue to suffer with the addition of paranoia that any knock on your door could be the end of your family as you know it. When that knock does come, ACS intimidates parents using their soulless scare tactics, including threats and police presence, to enter your home and turn your private living space upside down, invading every nook and cranny of your personal space in a hunt to find anything they can blow out of proportion to annihilate your family. They will strip search your children, who you have taught not to show strangers their naked bodies, and any normal cut, bruise, or rash that kids will get will be used to accuse their parents of abuse. ACS is the real abuser. This is unwarranted disparagement.
Expired.
May I conclude? I'm almost finished.
You may.
Thank you. This is unwarranted disparagement and ongoing unchecked abuse that needs to be stopped. Parents need to know from the onset of an investigation that ACS does not have the right to enter your home without a court order, and that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law in a vile attempt to destroy your family and life. Children exposed to foster homes are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. Mothers who've been stripped of their children are 5 times more likely to commit suicide. This injustice kills, and those whose lives it spares are subject to lifelong torment of PTSD symptoms and the professional and social fallout of having a history with ACS or so-called foster care. 4% of people who experienced foster care go on to college. The vast majority end up homeless, in gangs, addicted, incarcerated, mentally ill,
all emotionally sick and suffering. When they have babies, those babies are more likely to be subjected to the foster system, and this vicious cycle continues. Stop this madness now. To truly protect kids, we need to protect the people who love them the most, their parents. Please keep loving families together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, for your testimony. Seeing now that we do not have anyone else logged in who has registered to testify at today's hearing, at this point, if we have inadvertently missed anyone who is currently logged in, who has not testified and wishes to do so, if you can please use the Zoom raise hand function. Seeing Joyce McMillan with a hand raised.
Hi, yes, I'm Desiree Wright. I am in attendance. I couldn't get into the link, but yes, I'm Desiree Wright. I'm an advocate. I'm an affected parent as well, and I work closely with Planned and JMAC for Families. I believe that parents need to know their rights. It is imperative. It is due process, right? We should be protected by the law. Criminals are. In the criminal system, it is done. Families need to know that. It is systematic racism when parents are not knowing their rights and their homes are being intruded, kids are being strip searched. A lot of these allegations are frivolous. They're not where a child should be subjected to coming in the home, looking in the refrigerator. I have to get questions from my son. Why is he people looking at my body? He's only a baby, and you have to explain this to your child. They use their tactics of bringing the police into your home and potentially just scaring your child as well. When the child sees the police, sees these authorities coming into your home, basically pushing their way into your home, and families not knowing their rights. And I believe that every mother and every family in New York City, all over, should know their rights. All over the world should know their rights and know what they're going against when it comes to ACS knocking on your door. And thank you for having me here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Desiree, and thank you to this panel for testimony. Chair Ayala, at this point, we do not have any additional members of the public signed up to testify.
With that, I want to thank all of the panelists for attending today's hearing, and this hearing is adjourned.